No one comes to this channel to listen to me talk about myself, and I pride myself on that fact. If you want to listen to people talk about themselves, there are plenty of channels you can go to for that sort of thing. But after 5 years of toiling in the YouTube vineyard and steadfastly abiding by that policy, I am granting myself a special one-time dispensation. As many of you know, last year I lost my eldest daughter, Lauren, at the age of 25. On the night of our very last dad-daughter date, we went and saw Deadpool and Wolverine. We had so much fun. We got back home, parked the car, and we had about a 40-minute long heart-to-heart that was mostly about our respective hopes and dreams for the future. She knew, as does everyone who was close to me, that I had begun doing this YouTube thing with a mind toward hopefully, somehow, at some point, transitioning out of my building industry office job and spending the remainder of my professional life doing the things I am actually best at, which is some combination of writer, monologuer, humorist, political analyst, historian, parody singer, songwriter, and whatever the hell else it is I do here. And she said to me right at the end, I remember it like it's a mental video clip and it will live in my head forever. She said, "Dad, if you're serious about doing the other thing, then you need to leave your job and freaking go for it." And 5 days later, she was gone. I didn't make any content for about 6 months after that. Just couldn't bear the thought of being on camera, talking on camera, looking at myself on camera, any of it. Self-confidence totally shattered. Self-esteem gone. Everything that's required to be good at doing this wasn't there anymore. And I had to start learning how to live in a world where I have failed in the most solemn duty a man ever has, which is keeping his children safe. I'm still learning how to live in that world, and that learning will continue for however long it is that I remain alive. Needless to say, whatever momentum I had managed to build up in the first 4 years of doing this quickly evaporated, as it does, and my skills eroded as well, because one's skills always erode when one goes from doing a thing on a daily basis to not doing it at all. I went back to my day job a few weeks after the funeral, which was probably far too soon. I wasn't performing at a very high level. I was crying in the bathroom at least once per day, which I am not embarrassed to say. I was, to all intents and purposes, just kind of a zombie going through the motions, engaged in a futile attempt to get back to the normal life I once had, which is ultimately a self-defeating exercise, since that normal life is never going to exist again anyway. And Lauren's words, the last bits of advice that she ever imparted to me, were still ringing in my ears. If you want to do the other thing, if you want that to be your future, then you have to go for it as hard as you can. And the only thing I really want out of life is to honor her and to honor that advice. That's something I have to do. I can't not do that. So I had a parting of the ways with my employer of the previous 10 years, and I resolved to not just recover my skills in this sphere, but to be better at it than I have ever been. I'm going to be funnier, more knowledgeable, more insightful, more efficient. I am going to be better at this stuff than anybody has ever been before. I'm going to recover my self-confidence. I'm going to start at 6:30 each morning. I'm going to work my ass off all day, every day, whether it's writing, researching, shooting, editing, cranking out some shorts, making thumbnails, all of the above. And I don't mind saying I am currently making the highest quality content that I've ever produced. I can make better, more ambitious videos in less time than ever before. But I see a lot of other channels with 1 million, 1.5 million, 2 million subs, where the creators make a fairly nice living for themselves, doing more or less the same sorts of things I do, but significantly less well than I do it. And I guess therein lies the problem. Do I have a good explanation for why some other guy has 1 million subs doing content that is clearly inferior to my content and I am still sitting on 3,700? I do not. But I've heard it said that YouTube is effectively a pay-to-play scheme now, where unless you have a certain budget to invest in paid promotion, and I've heard the number of $100,000 thrown around here and there, you simply won't be permitted to gain sufficient traction in order to make this your living. I have heard it said that the days are long gone when YouTube allowed people to gain a large following through purely organic means based solely on the quality of their work. Can I say definitively to what extent that's really the case? I cannot. But I also can't pretend I haven't seen real-world evidence that might lead one toward that conclusion. When you put up a video that gets 500 views in the first 15 minutes and then it immediately drops off to 0, it's difficult not to suspect that somebody is turning off the tap. When your first ever parody song gets 700,000 views and none of the subsequent ones can ever sniff 7,000, it's difficult to conclude that that's purely an organic thing. It seems more like a case where YouTube accidentally allowed the first song to escape into the wild and made sure that the mistake wouldn't be repeated. Or it could be that they are like drug dealers and they give you a little taste every so often just to keep you chasing the dragon, because I've heard people throw around that metaphor once or twice as well. But at the same time, as an objective citizen journalist, I also have to freely admit that as good and as confident as I am on the creative, performative side of things, I'm really quite hopeless on the business side, because there just aren't enough hours in the day to devote as much time and energy to the latter thing as one does to the former. So, long story short, I need to place myself in the hands of someone who knows better than I do what to do with me. How do I describe my skill set? Well, one of my more sympathetic correspondents once described me as the four-way bastard love child of Dennis Miller, Paul Harvey, Mark Twain, and Weird Al Yankovic, and that's probably the most concise summation of myself that I have yet heard. Will it be the end of the world if I have to just give up and go get another office job? No, there are far worse fates than that. But I would very much prefer to make my living doing the things I am best at, using these skills that I have honed to a sharp razor's edge. I can write 10 minutes of monologue per hour, which is around 1,500 words at my normal talking speed. I can do it on command. I never get writer's block. The Curmudgeon's Corner videos take about 8 hours in total to research, write, shoot, edit, and upload. Hell, if I didn't have to be the editor and the thumbnail guy, I could do half a dozen of those videos per day if you needed me to. The last couple of parody songs I did, I completed in under 6 hours from conception to premiere. And I don't mind telling you fine people, I can play this teleprompter like a goddamn Stradivarius. In fact, I will put my teleprompter skills up against those of any professional newsreader in the whole wide world, and I'll put my monologue writing skills up against any of the people who compose their material. I'll put my corpus of historical knowledge up against that of any professional historian. I'll put my comic skills up against those of any professional comedy writer. And I will put my rugged handsomeness up against... well, I think that speaks for itself. And look, if this was just a case of, dude, you're not as good as you think you are, you don't have the skills to do this for a living, then I wouldn't have any problem packing it in and going back to doing what I used to do. But not one person has ever said that to me. Even my harshest critics have never said that, even though I haven't been shy about asking the question. The private feedback that I most often receive, and I have received it from numerous people, many of whom were perfect strangers, is, how are you not making a fortune at this? Do I wish I knew the answer to that question? Yes, very much so. Is it slightly embarrassing that I'm not making a fortune when the consensus, by all appearances, is that I should be? Also, yes. So if you or someone you know can make use of a man like your humble correspondent, Jim Eagle is going to put the email address on the screen, so do feel free to drop me a line. I will give you my number if you would prefer to communicate that way. And no, Jim Eagle and I are not necessarily a package deal. I am more than happy to abandon his ass by the side of the road if it should come to that. And I will not close with my customary benediction of get off my lawn. In fact, please feel free to walk directly across that lawn, right up to the front door. I've got a cold beer waiting for you inside, or an iced tea if that's your preference. Thanks very much for your kind attention. Have a great day.